are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me, the viral
yes, sir.
Joe
For not
DeLeone.
the right reasons. For not the right reasons.
Well, I mean, you had guys barking at you on Twitter. People were coming at you for your Stetson Bennett take. I try to tell you, but you don't listen to your bro. You don't listen to your boy.
Look, a lot of what I said, I still stand by. Some people that were willing to have a coherent back and forth did acknowledge a couple holes in the argument. I did rethink my approach to how I felt about Stetson Bennett. I don't think we need to necessarily rehash it. But God, there are so many mouth breathers out there that just have nothing better going on than to just physically assault me with their words. Just not even reacting to what I said. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, you do have some people that were getting after you. Some people were getting after you. But look, it is what it is. At least you stand firm in your take. But yes, Jared, our good friend over Believe, I mean, really just sold you. Really just sold you out. But nevertheless, we have a massive show in store for you here today. The Jaden Rashada stuff, Joe, has really been taken off. We'll touch on that. Florida, look, I'll get it. We'll go through all that. Committed to Miami, flipped in November. It was reported because of big NIL deal. I still don't believe that. Okay. He signs his letter of intent. Then he was the last person to sign. Billy Napier waits to do his press conference until Jaden Rashada signs so he can talk about it. It's been a cluster. I'm going to tell you why, Joe, in my opinion, why this isn't all on Florida anymore. Jaden Rashada's got to take responsibility, okay? And not only that, his camp needs to take responsibility too. I think that he needs to grow up a little bit. Lane Kiffin, about to get – look, I know I'm an LSU guy, but there's a lot of buzz. Lane Kiffin might be building something a little bit here as Pete Golding now leaves Alabama. Former DC at Southeastern Louisiana lining up, Joe. Lining up to the FCS Southeastern Lions. But not only that, is Walker Howard from LSU, the five-star quarterback, is he transferring to Ole Miss? Could he beat out Jackson Dart? There's some rumblings going on there. Also, C.J. Stroud has not declared. Today is the last day for C.J. Stroud. Let's not say what we think he's going to do. I guess let's go pros and cons. We'll probably spend a little bit on that. What does it mean for Ohio State?
Yep.
And we had some massive news over the weekend. Started Thursday, Friday. Garrett Riley is going to Clemson. Brian Hartline takes over the OC at Ohio State. And as I just mentioned, Pete Golding is taking over the DC roles at Ole Miss. So, Joe, I guess we have a lot that we have to discuss. I guess my biggest thing in all of this was, did we really think Dabo wouldn't adjust?
Well, I was in the camp that based on past examples, that Dabo was just going to rehire somebody that was already a part of the coaching staff. He hasn't had the willingness to look outside of his scope, his current tree of guys, which has held him back significantly. And that's what a lot of people, and frankly myself, have argued is what is going to prevent them from taking that next step. And you know what you do if you're Dabo and you want to hush those concerns from outsiders? You go hire the best guy on the market. And I know that TCU got dog walked by Georgia in the national championship game. They only scored 7 points. Yes, puns intended. I know that they got absolutely smacked around during the national championship game. They only put up 7 points. But I think we can all agree, watching them the whole season, that Garrett Riley is one of the most creative coaches in college football. His capability to get and scheme guys open with limitations, significant talent limitations, is really promising. And that's what Clemson's needed. That is what they've needed. And this is a huge, huge move with Cade Klubnik taking over next year.
Let's see what happens with TCU too. There's Kendall Briles. It's kind of been reported that they're going hard after Kendall Briles. Let's see if he makes a transition. If he leaves, in my personal opinion, if he leaves Arkansas to go to TCU, I think that that's a downgrade in a lot of ways because you don't have a starting quarterback. I mean, you do have KJ Jefferson that's returning. I still feel like that's a little bit of a downgrade, even though TCU just played for a national championship. We'll get to all of that. So, look, Joe, let's do this. We got so much we have to get into. Yeah. Let's talk about our good friends first, though, over at betonline.ag. Guys, last night, Joe, I got to be honest, I knew that the Minnesota Vikings were phonies. They were fugazis. Okay. So with that, I got to give a shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Burrow, for being who he is and helping me hit my parlay last night. $100 on the Bengals last night. You got to love them. It was a great game. But the place that we do that all is betonline.ag. So let's talk about them right now, guys. We return in 45 seconds. So much college football and football talk we got to talk about next. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right, let's get this thing rolling, y'all. So, Joe, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this to start the show here today, but I do want to talk about this Jaden Rashada stuff. So just in case people don't know who Jaden Rashada is, he's a four-star quarterback that out of California, and, Joe, it's kind of been all over the place. And this is, for the older fan, historically, the people who don't like NIL, this has been the pinnacle of what they've been talking about this entire time with Jaden Rashada. So Jaden Rashada commits to Miami, goes on multiple visits. It doesn't matter where he visited, but he commits to Miami. Then around November, some things started swirling that the University of Florida was going to match, if not give more money to Jaden Rashada in recruiting. That wasn't really true in my opinion. My opinion surfaced, well, Miami was dookie water. And so a kid was thinking to himself, okay, why would I go to Miami when they're complete ass? So Jaden Rashada people can say it's money all they want to. I don't really think that's why he flipped. But nevertheless, in late November, he flips to, or somewhere around November, he flips to Florida. There was a speculation of a massive NIL deal, this Gator Collective. Then there was this, I guess, agent on Twitter who kept saying, the Gator Collective was really bad, and it just got a lot of headway. But then all of a sudden, he signs the letter of intent. This is where I knew something was about to go wrong with Jaden Rashada. He signs the letter of intent. He's the last kid to sign. Billy Napier pushes his press conference back an hour so the kid would sign, and it felt like the kid never wanted to be there. Let me say this. I'm going to stick up for Florida a little bit. Florida is not a program, and in all the years that I've been growing up, when they say that they're going to pay and do something, they do it. Joe, they spent $60+ million on a baseball facility, where in college baseball is not like the world beater of things to where it's making landscapes amounts of money like college football. Don't tell me Florida and Florida boosters won't spend money. I think that this falls on Jaden Rashada. And the problem is when someone like us talks about a recruit, when something bad goes on, you get a backlash of, he's just a kid. Well, at some point, your parents have to, your camp, your parents, somebody has to tell you, grow up. If this is about money, then, buddy, you should have just known all the ramifications that could not have had. Joe, he was supposed to be an early enrollee. He doesn't show up on campus. Now he wants out of his letter of intent. It's been a cluster. If I'm Billy Napier, if I'm Florida, I don't let him out of his letter of intent, but I tell him he's not welcome here. If you want to do this to us, it's business at this point. I hate it for the kid, but I'm not letting him out of that LOI.
Things get really tricky trying to evaluate this situation, and I don't think that there's necessarily a party here that's not at fault. What becomes ultimately super complex is that a lot of these kids have advisors, basically an agent, and he's represented by an agency that is advising him on this situation and has been advising him on his NIL stuff. So he is in a circumstance where this isn't his own decision making. Like he is being directed to do and handle the situation a certain way. And I'm sure that there have been significant negotiations for him to get that money. I don't know if I really put all of it on Rashada. I feel like I give him some benefit of the doubt. The thing is, if they have the money and they're willing to pony up the money, what's the holdup here? That's where I'm confused on. Is like, why isn't he coming? Why hasn't he enrolled yet? Why is he demanding to get out of that national letter of intent? What is the reasoning behind all of it if they have the money? In what way? What do you mean?
Well, there are some people out there that I talk to around the SEC who think there's other teams that tell him that he shouldn't go there because they're not going to pay him, and that Billy has a lot of problems. Now, Joe, on this show about 4 weeks ago, we had a long discussion on this show about me telling you Billy Napier's in a lot of trouble. This revolved around it. Okay, there's been issues with Billy Napier in recruiting. Okay, for a while now. But I think that there's got some tampering involved in this and people telling him not to go. Here's my thing. Everybody wants to put this on Florida, and I understand it. But why is this kid having an issue with everywhere he goes in reference to money? It wasn't just a Florida thing. It's a Miami thing too. Like he said, the same issue with Miami. So you mean to tell me, so there gets a point, okay? There becomes a point where it's like, hey, how many times does it have to happen before it's just the person and not the institution?
Right. And I think ultimately what complicates the NIL issue and what complicates all of this is that it is turning into a contract negotiation, which is, in theory, that's not what they wanted it to be. That's not what they wanted NIL to be. They wanted it to be a way for guys to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. That was what the intention was. It wasn't for, okay, an inducement for, okay, we want you to come here. Here's what we're offering. Here's the money that we're going to give. And I think the Jaden Rashada example is the perfect extreme to illustrate that it is not organized and handled properly. If you sign a contract, there needs to be a accountability on both sides that I'm going to show up, and then at a certain point, I'm going to get that money. And I think that, like what you're talking about, if that is the case, that outside programs are trying to sway his management team and say, hey, they're not going to pay you the full amount. You should come here. We're going to give you that full amount that you're looking for. That's gross that if that's what we're at right now, where he signed his national letter of intent, he was supposed to enroll early, and he was derailed because of those instances. I just think overall, this is the perfect nightmare situation for NIL and proof that we need some sort of guidelines.
Why is it just him? Guidelines for what? Because I'm not going to change.
Well, you sign something, you should show up. That's what the guidelines
are. No, correct. I'm with you there. But what I mean is, like your last comment was, that's, we need more, like guardrails or whatever. But guardrails for what? In this sense, okay, you can't stop. And look, we get so political with all this stuff, and which I hate. That when we talk about this, it's got to get so political.
Yeah.
But I'm not changing anything for Jaden Rashada. Not a thing. But here's the problem that I have. Okay, the problem that I have is that you sit in a situation where this really hurts Florida now. Now, here's the only thing. If I'm a Florida fan, Billy, you should have known better, because he did this with one of your rivals. So now you're in a situation where this has happened multiple times. Okay, this happened to you. This has happened to Miami. The kid better go out and ball out. That's all I can say, Joe, because when you pull stuff like this, the public backlash and pressure is going to be very high on him. I don't know what I don't know what to do. I wouldn't. If I'm Billy, the problem gets here. Is Billy continues to have so many issues.
Yeah.
So many issues. Brother, you're 6-7. You lost to Vanderbilt. He is not in the public eye of things. It just doesn't look good for him. Again, I don't hate Billy. Okay? But at the end of the day, something's got to change.
I said this on another show that it definitely does damage his credibility, even if it has nothing to do with him, even if it has Nothing to do with the collective, and this is all a Jaden Rashada issue. Again, the level of uncertainty here without knowing the entire story, without talking to Rashada and getting that information, I think complicates it a little bit. But it is so damaging to the point where in the future, in recruiting trails, I don't know how kids are going to trust him, because now the resounding rumor is that the collective can't pay, even if that's not true. And even if that's not the case, that is going to hurt him down the line. And I also said this last show when we talked about at the end of the show, I really do believe that this has very, is very reminiscent of the Brian Harsin situation. There's just a lot of weird details that pop up that he doesn't have a lot of control. He's not really able to wrangle these guys to listen, get in line, all of those things. It's concerning. It's absolutely concerning. And again, it feels like that offseason with Brian Harsin that led to a very downhill path. He's going to need to start the season strong. They can't mess around. They cannot start off to a slow start, because people are going to be calling for his head, especially if Rashada does not come and he does not end up being in Florida, which is likely to happening.
Well, you can't take him now. You can't take him now. You got to tell him to move on.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't let it. I would not let him on campus.
I just don't see a circumstance separate from all of what we're talking about here. I don't see a circumstance that he ends up there. I think both sides, it seems like they're both pretty burnt by this whole circumstance. It's kind of goofy that the Florida fans, for some reason, still think that there's a possibility the kid shows up. But I think that this whole thing is played out. He's going to suit up for another school next year. It would be a shocking revelation if they were able to get on good terms after everything that has gone down.
Well, for Billy, the only thing I got to say is, Joe, Billy didn't make a lot of friends when he turned down Auburn and turned down South Carolina. And then now you go to Florida. And I will tell you, if this doesn't pan out for Florida and Billy Napier, then Bud, what did you fire Dan Mullen on? Because he's not recruiting at a level that's completely different than Dan Mullen.
Yep.
Their AD's got to be feeling a whole bunch of pressure here. Florida went and got Billy Napier so LSU wouldn't. Okay, that's it. No, I'm serious.
You're right.
If you remember the hiring, they met with him on a Monday, they hired him on a Friday. And LSU was waiting for Brian Kelly, obviously. So my point is, you rushed to have this hire, and you bet, Joe, I'm going to tell you this right now. If he doesn't get to 9 wins next year, he's in trouble.
Absolutely.
He's in severe trouble. You can say whatever you want about Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen is a wizard. He is Dr. Strange of calling plays. Okay, so keep making fun of Dan Mullen. I dare you to. Okay, since we got through that, let's move on to another quarterback who actually is kind of good, and we know that he's good. I have not yet to see C.J. Stroud make an announcement that he is going into the NFL draft. Now, I'm scrolling through this. I don't see anything. Actually, he did just make an announcement. Hold on. Okay, so C.J. Stroud did just make an announcement. Pete Thamel is reporting C.J. Stroud. So there is some breaking news while we do this live. C.J. Stroud just announced that he's going to the NFL draft.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Good timing that we didn't
really
speculate show
really
finish
good
and that we
so I mean, there was a lot of questions. Is he going? Is he returning? I don't know why he waited that long, but look, it would have been big for Ohio State if he would have returned, but the kid has no business returning to Ohio State, in my opinion.
Right. From an NFL draft perspective and then reaching the next level, it makes absolutely no sense. But for this perspective of like, hey, look how close we got to beating the team that just won the national championship. I'm sure that there was a lot of discussion between him and Ryan Day, him and his agent, that were saying there's a real shot. There's a real shot that we could win a national championship if I decide to go back, because really they're not losing that many guys. They're losing their 2 tackles. They're losing Jackson Smith and Jigba, but they're returning most of those big name receivers that helped him have such a good game against Georgia. And I think that there might have still been some of that feeling of like, hey, we're really just starting to hit stride on how good I can be as a player. But to your point, as an NFL draft perspective, next year's class might actually be better than this one. And I know we do that every freaking cycle. And we always say every single year, oh, next year's going to be better. Next year's going to be better. But he's more likely to go as the second quarterback in the class than he is in next year's class, which includes Drake May, Caleb Williams, JJ McCarthy, Cam Ward. I could sit here and keep naming more guys, but there are a lot of big names that are going to be a part of that group.
And look, you're going to think I'm absolutely wild in saying this. You have some guys that you could have a breakout season where CJ Stroud could fall. Meaning, what does Jaden Daniels do? My biggest thing about I am so homerish when I talk about this kid that I'm about to mention. I love him so much. Michael Penix Jr.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Jaden. I thought you were going to continue on Jaden Daniels, but Michael Penix Jr. absolutely.
No, look. So as an example, okay, you had Anthony Richardson, your guy, the guy that you love so much, climbing up boards.
Yeah.
What if you have a situation where Jaden Daniels goes out into LSU next year and wins the West and makes a playoff versus a CJ Stroud team? Look, Ohio State's losing weapons.
Yes.
Okay. Outside of Marvin Harrison, who's returning, they are losing some weapons. Now, we'll get to the Brian Hartline thing in a minute about him becoming the new OC. Maybe that helps him. But it's not like Ryan Day was a bad play caller. Ryan Day has not been a bad play caller at all. So when you sit here and you say that, well, CJ Stroud may have benefited, there's nothing to benefit him for because this class next year from quarterbacks is going to be really good. Who are you battling out with if you're CJ Stroud right now? Will Levis?
Right. There's a ton of uncertainty.
Battling Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. I know you love Anthony Richardson, but come on, dog. CJ Stroud made so much money when he went out there and did what he did against Georgia. Let's call it what it is, because he ran with his legs. He was highly accurate. He did a lot of good things. This is the right decision. Don't come back here. I mean, he's literally putting $25 million on the line.
Yes.
Don't do it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think that this, again, far and away was the decision. And to properly illustrate the class, right now, in my eyes, there's a two-man race for who should be the top quarterback selected. Now, conversations you and I have had off air, the guy he's competing with is Bryce Young. But there are going to be concerns about Bryce Young's size that might push him back a little bit. I am hoping that the Will Levis smoke is nothing more than smoke. I point to a couple of years ago when Mac Jones was a part of the NFL draft, and there were murmurs that he was going to be the third overall pick to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I had a little bit of inside information, and I knew that pick was going to be Trey Lance. Most teams will bet on upside and will likely go with the guy that they're a little bit more confident in. And I think that most realistic NFL evaluators are going to see CJ Stroud and are going to fall in love with him. The one thing that makes me feel that the Will Levis stuff is definitely a smoke show, or a smoke screen, rather. Smoke show is not the right word. It's distracting in a different way. The reason why I think that that's absolutely smoke is how early on in the process that has popped up. There is always some narrative that pops up at the beginning of the cycle, and it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And it's going to continue to build up. He's going to go out to the combine. He's going to have a bunch of errant bad throws. He's going to have one crazy deep one, and everyone's going to talk about how great he does in the interviews, and that is going to feed it. If you're a top team picking, you want them to buy into the fact that he should be the first guy selected. Like if you're the Bears, you want some idiot new GM or old GM that's fighting for his life to trade up to pick him. That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, I agree with that. Or you go and you get for number one overall pick defensive lineman. I mean, look, that's helping out Jacksonville. Unless you can get a lot of picks for, we'd have to see. But I agree. Like, who was the guy that got drafted by the Titans last year? Malik
Willis. He was a third-round pick.
Even then, I mean, well, he wasn't a first-round pick. But if you were, to your point, I mean, like they were pumping him up the whole draft process and like pumping him up, and because of that deep shot that he took in the combine. I'm like, listen, guys like Joe Milton are going to stand out. Like now Tennessee starting quarterback, can he play? CJ Stroud's a dude, and he's going to continue to be a dude. Now, are there some things off the field that teams need to know about? Probably, and they want to talk about it. But I told you this off air, and I've said this on AYS. I'll say it here. I know of people in the NFL right now that are scouts that really look at Bryce Young and scratch their head. We'll have to wait and see. But Bryce Young, they say he's 6 foot. If he's 6 foot, Joe, I look like Adonis. Okay. I'm Achilles from the movie Troy. Call me Brad Pitt. Okay. Because I got chiseled abs and women love me. I'm on the cover of GQ. That man ain't no 6 foot. I'm just telling you that right now. I've seen him in person. But good for CJ Stroud. What I will say into the transition of this, because we were going to spend some time on it now that he's declared, it doesn't really matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting, though. Ohio State, what did they do at quarterback? We'll have to wait and see. But the biggest news in the Southeastern Conference, I think that's really been trickulating over the last couple of days, has been coming out of Ole Miss. And that really being Pete Golding going to Ole Miss and leaving Alabama. Saban does not lose guys in conference. So this is, in and of itself, I think people are scratching their head. Now, Alabama fans didn't like Pete Golding. They thought that for whatever reason. But look, people, when I've said this to Alabama fans in the past, Joe, they say, well, Blake, you grew up around Pete. He's from your area. He's from Hammond. He coached at Southeastern where you played. So you're biased. But, Joe, I went and looked this up this morning, and we'll tweet this out. Here's Pete Golding's total defensive numbers. Okay.
Really good.
Since he started at Alabama in 2018, 13 in 2022. In 21, he was 18. In 20, he was 13. 19, he was 13. And 18, he was number 12. He's had a top 15 defense every year besides one, and that was last season in 18. When you were getting torched a lot of times because you were having to go out there and outscore teams for whatever reason, albeit, they were really young. This is a massive hire for Lane Kiffin. Not so much as from a schematic standpoint for them. Pete Golding can recruit. And anybody in Alabama will tell you, oh, it's just Nick. Okay. All those kids you got, he's been a part of. Will Anderson says hello. So this is a big deal. And now Lane Kiffin's pushing for a 5-star quarterback. A guy in Walker Howard who I really believe could beat out Jackson Dart. Is Lane Kiffin kind of making some serious moves here? Like, what you think's going on here at Ole Miss?
Yeah, I want to say, though, it's really funny, like when I was reading up on this, the weird disdain for Golding and thinking that he's not a good coach, but you just perfectly headlined it. This has been a top defensive coordinator in the country, and I always found it weird with Golding that he never got a lot of attention for how good of a coach he was. It was never brought up when talking about the defensive players, the defensive talent. His name was never brought up in the discussions. We're always talking about who Alabama's offensive coordinator is, but it's never been who's the defensive coordinator. And part of me believes maybe this Golding decision is, hey, I want to step outside of the shadow of Saban. I want to go make a name for himself. I'm sure that there was a lot of money that was thrown at him. It's probably a raise for him to head on over to Ole Miss.
So it's $150,000 pay decrease.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't. Yeah, when I read it, there were no numbers reported on it.
There's not.
Oh,
but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a pay decrease. But like you just mentioned, so we're all on the same page here. He's going to have total autonomy of the defense. So he's not running anything that's like. Look, I've known Pete for a long time. Okay, a long time. What he ran at Southeastern, what he did at USM, what he did at other places. Okay, this is not the defense that he's ever run, ever. Okay, he's never run the defense that he's had since 2018 at Alabama. That's what Saban wants him to do. I don't think people understand that. And you have someone like myself who's seen firsthand, this is not what Pete Golding wants to do. Pete Golding is the most multiple defensive coordinator everywhere he's been besides Alabama. He wants to send more pressure. Joe, let me tell you this. There was a quarterback, I forget what his name was. He was like the FCS player of the year, whatever. They blitzed him at Southeastern 98% of the time. Alabama never does that, okay?
No.
It's Saban's defense, and he's not, and you're going to run what Saban wants you to run. So Pete's, and in some aspects, running another man's defense, and he's still in the top 15. He's not been bad at all.
No, and here we are breaking the information on the contract. I didn't know that it was a pay decrease. I would have thought that, hey, this is a nice pay bump, and that's how you swayed him to come on over. But heck, the reasoning's right there. You just pointed it out. He wants to be able to say, this is what I can do. This is who I am as a defensive coordinator. He wants to have full creativity. I'm sure that there are probably some frustrations between him and Nick. And
No doubt.
look, we all know notoriously former coordinators of Nick Saban tend to be on weird terms, not bad terms, but weird terms when they exit. When they leave, there's usually like this weird tension between them and how they communicate with one another. We see it with Jimbo. We see it with Lane. We see it with a little bit with Sark. It's very odd to see how they interact with these former coordinators. So I'm sure it kind of got to a point where Pete was like, at first good offer I have. He was probably talking to Lane plenty. First good offer I have, I might take it. And here we are. He gets that chance to. And I would argue that if he has one, maybe even just one really good season at Ole Miss, it might set him up for a opening for a head coaching job. And I'm sure that is his long-term goal, is to get a really good head coaching opportunity at a big program. 1 or 2 years, he's been doing it long enough. And to prove that his philosophy works might set him up for that chance.
Well, here's a couple things. Number one, his wife is from that area. It's from Oxford. So she's going home. Okay. Let me just say this as someone who's married. When mama says it's time to go home, it's time to go home. Okay. And good for him in doing that. Now, Joe, I will give Saban this. Saban stood by him when he got a DWI. It was public. A lot of people heard the rumor about how it happened, and Saban stood by him. Saban could have fired Pete Golding a year ago when he legitimately got arrested for a DWI. Okay, since it's all public knowledge. But sometimes it is a little bit of you get in a situation where you're with Nick a little too long. And when you have kids, okay, sometimes it gets a little much. And, you can have grandparents that can help you out. But Nick, the Alabama fans will say this. Oh, yeah, he's going to Ole Miss, but it's a downgrade. But this is Saban's way of firing Pete Golding. He did not fire Pete Golding. Okay, he would have allowed Pete Golding to come back, because here's what Nick knows. Nick knows that he's had top 12, top 10 defenses. Joe, some of those defenses have been number one in the SEC. The only times that they haven't been, obviously, they were number 2 in the SEC last year in defense. Per the NCAA, when we pull up all the stats and stuff like that, they're number 1 or number 2 behind Georgia. It's not as if that they've been bad in the SEC at all. So when you're able to complete and do things, now a lot of that goes on with personnel, and I get it. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Now, the question is, does Jeremy Pruitt now start getting involved and being back at Bama? We'll have to wait and see. Now, he's under a lot of recruiting violations. But and a holistic thing here with Ole Miss, if they're able to land a Walker Howard, the former 5-star quarterback who's in the portal from LSU, and Lane continues to build what he's doing now, Lane's going to have a guy like – Lane always needed a guy like Pete Golding for recruiting reasons, okay? Now that he's starting to piece some things up, let's see what Lane's able to do here. Now, they're not doing great in recruiting. They're not in the lead of the SEC. I still think it's going to take some time here, but I do think that they've upgraded. And the biggest thing of all this is there's that rivalry between Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban just increases a little bit more, which I love so much. Lane is the ultimate troll. The ultimate troll. I kind of feel like he would hire him just to spite Nick Saban in a way. That's not why he did it. But I feel like that's the pettiness that Lane would fall into. Let's see what happens here with Pete Golding. But as a grade-wise, what would you give this hire for Lane Kiffin?
I think it's an A. I wouldn't grade this any lower because of his track record. And you point out the DWI issue, but I think as adults in this situation and moving on, and the handling of it has been taken care of. If you remove all that, he is one of the brightest minds in college football and in the SEC defensively. What you said, I think, perfectly illustrates it, though, is the recruiting aspect. It's not just who can cook up the best defensive scheme. It's who can get the best athletes onto the field. Like, that's what is most important. And over the next couple of seasons, I am sure that Pete is going to wrangle and get a lot of really, really good recruits, some very underrated names, or even big name recruits to come and enlist to play for this defense. Because, I mean, it's exciting if you're a 17-year-old kid to say to a linebacker, hey, man, we're going to blitz you every other play. We're going to send you at the line of scrimmage so you can go make some plays. You're not just going to be sitting back there behind your defensive lineman. I think a lot of kids with the right mentality are going to be excited about that. So definitely A+ hire for the recruiting side of things, for that schematic side of things. This is huge. And I don't think that Ole Miss would ever really be in a position for a guy like this in most years.
Of both the coordinators that are at Alabama right now, the one that I didn't think would leave first would be Pete Golden. I thought Bill O'Brien would have been shipped off to New England by now. Okay, back to old Bill Belichick, but buddy, they hadn't fired him yet. I mean, like, what's the holdup? You know, if Bill, I mean, what's the holdup on Bill? It's not as if the Patriots are in the playoffs. I mean, I really don't know what's going on there. It's going to be interesting to see if they get rid of Bill O'Brien. All right, the second biggest news, I'm going to give the floor over to you. Your TCU Horned Frogs got some bad news this week. Garrett Riley, Clemson, massive hire by Dabo. What you think?
Well, I'm not worried too much, first of all, from the TCU side of things. I'm not too worried about how this is going to impact them because, I mean, Sonny Dykes has shown a really good ability to structure a coaching staff and find all the right guys that lead to success. Every one of those coaches last year were big name guys in awards races and just in general were hugely impactful for the run that they had. But as I said at the beginning of the show, Garrett Riley is quite possibly the best offensive coordinator in the country. The way that he was able to set up that TCU team with the roster and talent limitations, you had one really good offensive player in Quentin Johnston. You had a quality running back and a couple other guys that you could lean on that roster. Duggan's not an elite talent. He's a good player. He's got a great mentality. He's a fighter, but you got him to a Heisman Trophy final that in most years, he's not coming anywhere near that. Garrett Riley, the way that he's able to scheme guys open is so fun to watch. And I think the fact that he is going to be scheming things up for Cade Klubnik, who is the number one quarterback recruit in his class, is scary. I think that the ACC is on notice. And as we were talking about on other shows, Florida State is the favorite to win the ACC, as they should be. But I think that I would argue that this puts them firmly back in the discussion to that race between Clemson and Florida State.
I agree with you. I think it does. Look, the only thing, and a lot of people have talked about this, is that the Rileys, Lincoln and Garrett, aren't able to scheme up when it matters the most. You know, they always kind of choke. Here's the biggest thing for me. It has nothing to do with, it does have to do with Garrett Riley. It also doesn't. I think the simple nature is that there are some times that Dabo gets labeled as something like, Dabo will never go outside of his own circle to hire anybody. Like, he won't do this. He won't do that. He comes up with these goofy sayings like, the only NIL I love is a name, image, and likeness in the name of the Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ, which, good for him. I'm a believer of Jesus Christ myself, but it's a little goofy sometimes the way that he delivers it.
Yes.
Here's my thing, though. Elite coaches make elite decisions. I'm old enough to remember when Nick Saban made the decision to move his offense from a pro-style one-back to a spread attack. Ultimately, they got a little too much into that, and it's kind of hurt them. It's kind of backfired a little bit. Dabo knows that he needs someone where he can just sit back, look, and say, Garrett, the defense is doing this. Garrett, the defense is doing that. Because when Dabo has had the best offenses, when they were rolling with elite quarterback play, it wasn't just the elite quarterback play. The way that they designed things, the way that the creativity that they did and things that they did offensively were quite honestly elite. It shows that when you have a good coach, and not just a good coach, but an elite coach, a coach that's won 2 national titles, Joe, he knows how to do it. He knows how to get there. You can hate Dabo all the live long day, but what did you think Dabo was ultimately going to do? Okay, he had to make a move. He knew defensively, and like they're doing again in recruiting, Joe, they're getting a lot of elite defensive linemen to go to Clemson. Okay, they got to do some things at wide receiver. They got to get better on the perimeter. I think that they'll be okay there. But now that you get Garrett Riley to come in here and can help your offense, it's only going to work wonders for you.
The only thing that I am a little bit wary of is that Dabo, first of all, a little bit of stubbornness still on his part that it took him this long to have an outside hire. He should have done it last cycle, but instead here he is now finally doing it. I am a little bit wary that Dabo might still be a little too hands-on. And he hasn't necessarily been restrictive on what has been called, but we have seen this weird, goofy offensive approach that has been used from coordinator to coordinator at Clemson. And I am hoping that he is not restrictive on what Garrett Riley runs. I am hoping that he just lets him have free reign, because that's what he had at TCU, and that is what worked at TCU. But if he comes in here and starts trying to get him to run that same scheme, I don't know if I'd have very much faith in Clemson for them to be productive next season. It would be very concerning if that's the case.
Dabo doesn't make that hire to micromanage.
But I feel like a lot of head coaches, like, that's the assumption, but then at the same time, it does end up happening.
Yeah, but what there is a level though that so we talk about Saban, right? Like Saban we just got talking about Pete Golding. What's the difference there? Like there's no difference in Saban doing that to Pete Golding versus Dabo seeing something. I will be honest. If Dabo sees something and wants you to run something, I might take his word over Garrett Riley, because at the end of the day, Joe, he's been to the top of the mountain twice. He's faced and went toe-to-toe with Goliath and knocked him off. We come in these situations where everybody thinks Dabo's just a very shitty coach. He's not. You can hate Dabo as a person all the live long day. He does these stupid little hickory dickory dock. And then he does this Coach Sweeney's on TikTok. He does those stupid shit like that. I don't care what he does as long as he's winning. Okay, like I could give two Rudy Poos. Brian Kelly did it at Notre Dame. He does it here. You have Kirby Smart doing it. You think Sonny Dykes didn't have philosophy on what he wanted to do in the national championship game? See, people blame Garrett Riley on that. What's the problem with Sonny Dykes? Great coaches do that. Yeah. I agree with you. He can't get too micromanaging, but he doesn't have to be micromanaging with Garrett Riley. You know that.
And again, I'm hoping that he's not. That's all I'm saying here is, and I don't believe that that's going to be the case, but we could step into the season and they could go right back to running that same goofy offense that didn't work for the past couple of seasons. And I'm hoping that that's not the case, because the ceiling right now with Klubnik running this offense, running this scheme, and Will Shipley is super high. There are so many good athletes on that offense, and there are legitimate concerns at receiver. They're going to need to address that. They're going to maybe hope the second cycle of the portal that they can grab somebody. But there is a huge upside, hugely tremendous upside for Clemson next year, assuming that he gets that free reign.
I'm going to say this, and you're going to really agree or really disagree.
Okay.
I think the ACC is starting to get into a situation where they might have two top teams that make them feel like that they're back a little bit. Look, if Florida State, which I don't think that they're going to do this, okay, but if Florida State goes out there and beats LSU week 1 and Clemson continues to run the table, Joe, you're talking about two ACC teams that have historically been pretty good programs. People are going to start saying, okay, well, the ACC is starting to get their stuff together. Now, will they do that? No, I don't think. I think top to bottom, they're one of the weakest conferences.
Yes.
But at the same time, I still think they're better than the Pac-12. I still think that they holistically from top to bottom are better than the Pac-12. And Dabo had to go get a big name hire to be able to take the next step. That's just my opinion. that's going to be a bloodbath between Florida State and Clemson. I'm all for it. Let's see.
Yeah, I push back though on the Pac-12. I think that from top to bottom, the Pac-12, the
argument again.
The Pac-12 is more balanced. There's more good teams towards the middle of the conference than there is for the ACC. I don't disagree that Florida State and Clemson are capable of beating SEC teams. That's what makes them competitive. And I can't say that for very many Pac-12 teams. I think USC next season and Oregon next season will be good enough to compete and potentially beat the SEC opponents that they might have to face down the line. But outside of Florida State and Clemson, you got North Carolina, and then you've got 50 feet of crap. I don't think any of those teams are competitive. They have been unjustifiably propped up because they're beating up on weak teams on their schedule. Like if Syracuse can be ranked as long as they were, and NC State can be in discussions for being ranked as long as they were, I think that's pretty good proof that they're a little bit of an overrated conference. The problem is that outside of the Big Ten and outside of the SEC, we just don't have consistently competitive conferences. That's where the problem lies. And I think the ACC fits that stereotype perfectly. You don't agree?
You know what I'm about to say.
The Utah argument that you're going to bring up every single
the Utah argument. But by the way, did you see? So what's the kid's name? The Jets quarterback that was with BYU. What did Garrett
Zach
Wilson?
Zach Wilson.
Did you see his mom is now on a visit with the younger brother at the
Utah? I did see
the comments going the way that they are.
Yeah.
First off, they're roasting the absolute dog crap out of her for posting in a photo with her son. Like what? They're like she's taking away some of his glory.
What? Because she's in the picture?
Yeah, and I'm like, so I was like going down the comments, and I'm thinking, oh man, all these old farts are gonna be like, yoo-hoo, babe. Hey, come look at these whitey tighties I got on. Nevertheless, they're always like, it's a bad look for Utah. What?
Well, it's probably all the crotchety people from Utah that don't like the flashiness of Zach Wilson and Zach Wilson's mom.
You don't like the flashiness of Zach Wilson, but you love polygamy.
Right. The contradiction and the irony.
The contradiction and the irony is absolutely ridiculous. Oh, okay. You got 72 wives, John Smith. So, I mean, like, calm down for just a minute. But in reference to back to football, yeah, the Pac-12's got to show me something, though, man. Now, I will say this now. Oregon's making some moves. Oh, Dan Lanning's making some moves out there in the Pac.
I think that Oregon and USC are very legit next year. I'm willing to rank them that high. And heck, look, we were just talking about Michael Penix. Washington's really good. They beat up on Texas.
Well, Michael Penix is good. Washington's ass.
They've got some dudes on defense. They've got some talented guys on the.
My point exactly.
I know that they've got good players.
You can't say, well, they got dudes. And then when I say name them, you'd be like,
I have too many names to remember. I know I'm making myself seem like a dipshit, but they do have some dudes on defense.
You need to welcome yourself to Pac-12 After Dark. Okay?
Okay, it's not after dark for me. It's usually pretty early in the night.
Yeah, it's probably like 6 p.m. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. All right. Last coaching hire or last coaching change that we've seen is Brian Hartline is now going to be the new OC at Ohio State. There's two things that I think about this. Number one, is Brian Hartline the best recruiter for his position in the country? Yes. Being the best recruiter at your position does not make you a good offensive coordinator. Now, Brian Hartline is a lot like Jim Leonhard in a lot of ways, in the sense of like when you have, Joe, these guys that have been around and played in the NFL and been a part of great offenses and things like that, they historically work out pretty well. Okay, historically, they've been around elite coaching. They've been around elite programs. It usually pans out. The only thing that I'm going to say to Ohio State fans is this. Ryan Day did not suck at calling plays. Ryan Day was really, really good at his job. The last game that you played showed that. Now, you're pretty much pressuring Ryan Day to give up play calling. But sometimes you better be careful what you wish for. Now, I've never seen Brian Hartline call plays before. And I will tell you this. If this were any other program at any other time, you would say to yourself, well, they just hired an OC that's never called plays before. Now, either you get a Joe Brady type of aspect where it could go really, really well, but he also had Joe Burrow. But you don't have Joe Burrow right now. Okay, you don't have that. You just don't have those type of dudes on offense right now. I still think Ryan Day is going to have a lot of involvement here. Yeah. Okay, he just might not have the play sheet, and you're not going to see his lips moving. But I still think he's going to be highly involved here. I think it's somewhat a little bit of a formality.
The main takeaway that I have from this is that Brian Hartline, all you have heard for the past couple of seasons are the murmurs of like, hey, this is the next big guy to pay attention to. This is a guy who is working in the shadows. That is the reason why that they've not only recruited all of the top receivers in every single class. Like, I implore our fans and our listeners to go look through every single year the top receiver recruits, and there's usually 2 kids in the top 10 that pick to go to Ohio State, and that's because of Brian Hartline. And it's not just the recruitment, it's the development. There are consistently guys from Ohio State in every single draft class that are developed well enough that they are able to step into an NFL offense right away and provide an immediate impact. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are a perfect example of that. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be an example of that. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be an example of that. That development to me shows this is a really great coach. And it sets him up to now take that next step. Move on from being just the receivers coach, just the receiver recruiter. I have full faith that he can produce really good results. But to your point, he's never called plays before. This could go horribly wrong. He could have no idea what he's doing. But at the same time, there are so many positive signs to see that he is a great coach. He's more than just a receivers coach, that he earned this opportunity to be the man leading this Ohio State offense. And I think it's just pushing off the responsibility to a different man in the coaching staff. One, again, that has earned that opportunity. But in general, this is exciting for the program. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not snatched up and hired as a head coach, and not next season, but within the next 3 to 4 years from a smaller program that wants him to lead their team.
Ohio State was still the number 9th offense in the country. They were number 1 in the country of the top P5 teams that you would think. 7.28 yards per play. Okay, led the Big Ten, led the country, led the playoffs. My only thing is it's not been an issue of play calling. It's been an issue of execution. Okay. Mm-hmm. Your O-line is struggled at times. Okay. You've gotten soft. I mean, Joe, the truth is, if you score 35 points against Georgia, you should win. It's a defensive issue. Okay. You get to a point where, at what point do you have to score so many points to say it's an offensive problem? So let me tell you my biggest pet peeve. I've never said this live, so you might be able to counteract me and just roast me on this. But I see so many people on Twitter and analysts say their offensive play calling was weak. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, they just had 500 yards and 35 points. What else do you want them to do? And then I sit back and say to myself, where are you getting on the defense? Jim Knowles was supposed to come in there and fix that defense. This isn't a Ryan Day problem. You're getting beat in the trenches. Joe, you know what the one thing that Ohio State's not doing at an elite level? Yes, they got receivers, they got quarterbacks, they got this guy, they got a really good safety, they got this guy. You know what they're not doing? They're not at the elite level in recruiting like you see in the SEC, where you see the defense and offensive linemen. They're just not cleaning up in those situations in those areas. So when the game gets down to the fourth quarter and C.J. Stroud is standing on the 35-yard line, and you tweeted this out, mm-hmm. Oh, well, here comes that pressure from Georgia, and he gets sacked and gets kicked out of field goal range. That's not a play calling issue.
Yeah.
It's an execution issue. Do you think that I'm wrong there? Because that is a massive pet peeve of mine, being an offensive guy.
No, to that defensive point, I don't think it's anything wrong with Jim Knowles and his scheme, because I think that he is a great defensive coordinator and he has vastly improved their production and the results that they had from the previous year, which was very problematic. I look at the issue as the recruiting thing that you just mentioned. When was the last time that they've had a top defensive back drafted? There was like a string of years where we were talking about guys coming from Ohio State in their secondary, and we haven't had anybody since Jeff Okudah that was in that conversation. They don't have those same level of athletes on the defensive side of the ball. They've got a couple of guys, a couple top recruits that they've recruited. Their development has not been great, but they certainly need to step up in getting top tier corners, top tier defensive linemen that they haven't had since that last national championship run a few years ago. That's where the concern is. To give up the amount of yards that they did to Georgia's offense, which is frankly relatively pedestrian in terms of talent, to give up that many points like you're talking about, that should have been a perfect opportunity for them to step up and make plays and stop them and win a football game. But they couldn't. They don't have the guys. They don't have, the scheme isn't the issue. They just don't have the athletes.
I agree. And so anytime, and Brian Champagne says this in the chat, anytime that you score 35 points, you should win. Joe, I still get that. And look, the LSU fans like Jason Brumfield just mentioned this out there. Like LSU got J.K. Johnson and Seven Banks just to go to LSU. Now, this isn't just an LSU thing. This has been going on in other places. Their elite guys aren't leaving. The starters aren't leaving. But the depth that they've had, the guys that they recruited those positions are leaving. The issue is not Ryan Day's play calling. The issue is you got to figure out how to maintain and start getting some of these defensive linemen. Joe, I will make this argument. Until they fix the line of scrimmages, they're going to continue to lose. Look, Ohio State has been known for, and I'll give them this, they always have good quarterbacks. Always. It always seems like they have a good running back. Problem is, man, up front, they're getting killed. Okay? If they can make that and you know what? You know who doesn't fix that? To our original point, you know who doesn't fix that? Brian Hartline, who's never played offensive line a day in his life.
Right.
He doesn't fix that at all. So everybody is like clamoring that this is going to be a massive overhaul and Ohio State's back because Brian Hartline's OC. Dog, the only times he's ever called plays is on Madden. Okay, that's the only time that he's ever called plays. Is he an elite recruiter? Yes. But at the end of the day, there's a sense of worry. Now, does Ryan Day take over? Can Ryan Day take over play calling if shit gets bad? Yeah. So you have that back. You have something good to fall back on. But at the end of the day, this gets to a point where just because someone has prestige doesn't make them a good play caller. Like, so, I can go on such a laundry list of dudes, but I don't know. I don't think it helps them any in beating Michigan. How about that? So their biggest worry is, oh, well, we were doing this because we've lost to Michigan twice in a row. This has nothing to do to help you to beat Michigan. Until you don't give up 200-plus yards on the ground in the second half, you're not beating them.
I also think part of it, too, is, I mean, let's act like this isn't part of Ryan Day's decision-making. Him being able to cast off some of the blame for the lack of results against Michigan and the lack of results in winning the Big Ten and winning college football playoff games. This does alleviate some of that blame. This allows for him to be able to say, like, hey, I'm not calling the plays. It's less pressure if he's not the man who's calling those plays. I know that sounds like a little bit of a tinfoil hat theory, but I'm sure that some of that decision-making came into this where it's like, hey, everyone is frustrated with me and the results that I'm putting out here. Some people are even calling for my job. But if I push off a little bit of that decision-making to Brian Hartline, I focus on the recruiting a little bit, there is going to be less pressure under my ass to produce the results.
I agree. All right. I didn't tell you about this as we start wrapping up the show. I didn't tell you I was going to talk about it.
Okay.
However, I want to finish the show on a note. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I tweeted, this past week, the wins and losses for the University of Texas. Now, Joe, do you remember me talking about it? Do you remember this tweet?
Yes, I do. You texted me that morning and you told me that you were intending to piss off a certain group of individuals that I work with.
Well, so let me just, as we're wrapping up the show, I just want to say something, because over the last couple of days, I saw some people that are Texas fans that were talking some really crazy nonsense about the SEC and how Georgia's Georgia's scheduling is weak. Well, Georgia, if you remember, if I'm not mistaken, Georgia was supposed to play Oklahoma. Okay, in the first game of the year, you know how they do the neutral site stuff and all that kind of stuff. Benjamin. Okay, my son's banging on the door because he's like, Texas sucks. Okay. Anyway, well, the SEC told Georgia you can't play them because you're going to be playing them in 20. Like, don't do that. Wait till they get in conference. Now, I'm going to share something with you, and just to give you an idea. So, to the Texas fans who continue to talk about the SEC being weak. Okay, since 2012, since the Big 12 was restructured and we had conference realignment, okay, Texas is 78-60, Joe, in college football. Since the SEC is so weak, here are some teams that are better or equivalent from a records perspective than they are. Bama, Georgia, LSU, the biggest one of all of them. Texas A&M is even better than you. Texas A&M over the last since 2012, 90-48. Florida, here's another one that's I can't believe this. Mississippi State has a better overall record than you do in a better conference. Auburn and your Ole Miss. So to Texas fans, for me, Joe, it's like LSU to some extent outside of the money enters Ole Miss. Ole Miss is entering the SEC in 25. Okay, it's not a game. So you can talk all you want to about all this stuff about, oh, we're going to start getting better recruits and we're going to start doing better things in recruiting and we're going to do some good things in the SEC. Bro, Joe, they've been 70-68 or 70-58 since they've been in since 2012. A&M is a better overall football team and a better overall football program, even with last year included, than the University of Texas.
Look, there's been a massive hangover. Absolutely has been the biggest hangover in college football since they were last good. Absolutely. Now, I understand the sentiment. I totally agree with the sentiment that they have stunk and they've been horribly embarrassing to watch. But they're moving on to the SEC. They hired a coach from the SEC in Steve Sarkisian to lead this program. I got to say, I think that there's a lot of promise for this Texas team. And I said this when we were in the Twitter spaces during the national championship game. They're finishing with top 5 recruiting classes. And they're going to keep
finishing with top 5 recruiting classes.
But I think that there's been more of an actualization of that talent than there has ever been under any other coach. Well, Sark's only been there for 2 years. I think that the way that
only been there for 1.
I think that the way that they played against Alabama is proof that they are moving in the right direction. Defensively, they look really good, but they're inconsistent. They're very inconsistent. To try and pivot from what Tom Herman did and the guys that were there that were not a part of the Steve Sarkisian culture, to try and pivot like that is going to take time. And what Brian Kelly did is on a different level. I don't think we should be comparing those two.
But why not?
Because Brian Kelly was a longtime head coach at another big program and needed to be in a situation with less limitations.
A conference that's better than the Big 12.
Yeah, and again, his results are extremely impressive, but I think Steve Sarkisian has had a very bumpy road and has not been a head coach for a period of time until recently, and it is going to take time for him to turn things around. For him to get the guys that he got in this last recruiting class, I think, again, it's very promising. Anthony Hill, Arch Manning are just some of the big name guys. There's so many 5-star recruits that they added to this group, and I think in 2 years, when do they make that pivot to the SEC? Is it 2 years?
2025. Yeah, 2025.
So when they make that pivot and those guys are juniors, I think that there is a legitimate chance that they are going to be competing for not an SEC championship, but at least for the top of the conference. I don't think that they're going to show up and get dog walked. I don't think that they're going to show up and get their asses kicked.
They're going to get dog walked. You know how I know that they're going to get dog walked? Well, let me not say that. Let me not say that they're going to get dog walked. Let me say this. can you prove it in the Big 12 first? Because if you can't prove it there in 2 years, Joe, the problem that I have is I continue to hear your same argument every single year. Every single year, it's the same exact argument.
Yeah.
And it never goes into fruition. The problem that Texas fans have is we only lost to 1 by Bama. Well, then the following week, you would go ahead and lose to Texas Tech. You can't do that. The inconsistencies, I understand it, and I get it. But at some point, you got to win those games. I don't think Texas has I don't want to say that they have a talent issue. I kind of think that they have a hiring issue. Okay? Sarkisian has no excuses with the transfer portal now. Okay? When you got Sonny Dykes winning your conference and going to a natty, brother, what's the difference between Sonny Dykes going to a national championship and Texas not getting there?
Sonny Dykes is a better coach. He's significantly a better coach. Here's the one thing
this is going to go viral.
Why? Because I'm saying that Sonny Dykes is the better coach than Steve Sarkisian? I don't think that should be a controversial. He got a team that didn't belong sniffing a national championship to a national championship.
Ruh-roh.
The one thing that I will say that I will relent in my argument is that I totally agree with you. If Texas does not win the conference next year, I'm changing my stance completely. I am absolutely changing my stance on this debate. I am switching to your stance that I don't have any faith in Texas unless they move on from Sark and they hire somebody else. I mean, heck, somebody even commented this. I wouldn't be shocked if they do fire Sark that Sonny Dykes isn't the man that they hire. I would argue that that's probably extremely likely. So if there's 2 outcomes here, you either hire the better coach in a couple of seasons or Sark gets it together and they end up being a competitive team and they win the Big 12 and then they move on to the SEC and then they're very competitive. Those are the two outcomes here.
I got to be honest. Sonny's not the guy I think they should go after. I think if I'm Texas.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you got to, at some point, you got to have somebody with SEC ties. Okay. Like you got to understand like what the conference, like you can't go up in the last time that you played Georgia as you getting dog walked by 59. Okay. Look, all I'm going to say is I forget the guy who covers Texas, I think for Orange Bloods or wherever he covers the team or for whoever. You can't go 78-60 and say that Georgia faces in a weak schedule and then turn right around and then your conference's best team, the team that beat you to win your conference got beat 65-7. It's not that they're playing a weak schedule. The weak schedule has nothing to do with it. The SEC has more elite teams than you do. Joe, right now, here's the truth, whether you like it or not. If Texas were to play in the SEC last season, this past season, they get to 6 wins and that's it. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's not good. That's not coming in and doing anything. What's going on with these top 5 recruiting classes? I think it might be a coaching issue. Okay.
And Sark's got 1 more year to prove it. He's got another season to prove it. And if those results show up on the field, I think our conversation is going to be very, very different. What if they show up and they win the conference? Like, are you still going to be in that?
If they win the conference, I would say, okay, well, then Sarkisian put it all together. Now he's starting to get things rolling. The problem with that is Tom Herman did the same thing and then it started to collapse. Okay. They're going to have some level of consistency in doing all of this. Hey, Texas fans, A&M, let's put it like this. A&M is a better football program than Texas. Texas A&M has a better overall football program than Texas does. Joe, at the end of the day, wins and losses are the only thing that matters. Clip this. Listen to me. Clip it. Make it the first thing you post. Texas A&M since 2012 has been the overall better program than Texas. The numbers don't lie. At the end of the day, wins and losses have to matter. when Texas is 78-60 and A&M is 90-48 and one is in the SEC West. Let's call it what it is. The toughest division historically in college football is the SEC West. They're averaging 9 wins a year, 8 to 9 wins a season at that 90 mark. You flip over to the Big 12, Texas is at 78, averaging around 7 wins a season. Maybe. Brother, at the end of the day, A&M has proven to be an overall better program right now in those years. And everybody can say, well, Jimbo's falling apart. Sounds cute. Sounds good. You've been falling apart since 2012 too. Let's not get it twisted.
I think since 2012, Texas A&M, yes, has produced better results. But I think at this current moment in time, there is a lot of structural mismanagement. Like the amount of guys that are hopping in the portal.
What's the difference of going 5-7 in the SEC versus going 6-6 in the Big 12?
But
a bowl game?
I'm looking less at the on-field results. I'm just talking about like right this second, Texas A&M has some serious issues with retaining talent. Texas has not had that same level of issue since Sark was hired. Texas A&M, the amount of stories that have propped up of kids doing stupid stuff off the field and then hopping in the portal is significantly higher than what's going on with this Texas program. So that's why I don't necessarily agree with that take, but yes, the on-field results for Texas A&M have been better. And there have been a lot of bad coaching hires by Texas in that run that have prevented them from succeeding. And again, I think that if Sark either's got one more year to turn this thing around, or at the very least, they're going to be in a better position to hire somebody that will set them up for success. The only reason why I said Sonny Dykes, though, is that while the SEC ties are important, I also think somebody with ties to the state of Texas is also important. You got to know the area. You got to be able to recruit the area. It's a very different, distinct location than recruiting in the Southeast. I think that being able and having a command and the connections in Texas and being able to recruit those guys properly will lead to success down the road.
A&M, Texas.
Currently, in terms of record.
How mad do you think the charity stripe guys are going to be?
They're mad over everything that's said negatively about Texas. They're delusional. So, well
the bottom line is they can be mad all they want to. Okay, but until God dog it. They can be mad all they want to. Proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
As my grandfather would say, stats, biatch. My grandfather never said that. All right. Joe, been a good show. You got anything else to add here?
No, let's see if we can make it through this show without saying anything that causes a storm. So let's find out if that happens.
I love a storm. I hope my Texas clip goes viral. I really do.
We'll clip all that.
All right. Till next time, guys. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good day. Oh, and I didn't even say this, and I apologize. Thank you to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, everything you did for us as a humanity, as a culture, for the United States of America. I should have let off of that. I didn't. I apologize. So thank you, and rest in peace to the great Dr. Martin Luther King. Until then, Joe, we'll see everybody next time.
Yep.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.